Welcome to our deep dive. I'm your host, and today we are getting into something incredibly fascinating.
I am so glad to be here to unpack this with you.
Yeah, because, it's funny how a single, seemingly mundane press conference can just accidentally define the way we look at human psychology.
Oh, totally. And massive institutional failure, too.
Exactly. I mean, years ago, former U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld stood at a podium and laid out this famous matrix of intelligence.
Right, the famous known speech.
Yeah, he talked about the known knowns, which are, the facts we have fully verified, then the known unknowns, the gaps we know we actually need to fill.
And finally, the unknown unknowns, right? The completely unpredictable blind spots.
Right. It sounds perfectly logical, almost mathematical. But there is a fourth missing category to this matrix.
And it is arguably the most dangerous one of all.
It really is. So today we are exploring that missing category for you. This deep dive is basically a masterclass in decoding the news.
Yeah, because we are looking at the unknown knowns.
Right.
But specifically, the subset of information that governments and massive institutions technically possess, but they systematically or even subconsciously just decide they do not want to know.
And whether you're curious about how those massive failures happen or you just want to spot political spin, this is going to give you a completely new lens for understanding the world.
What's fascinating here is that we aren't just talking about a politician standing at a microphone and telling a bold-faced lie.
No, it's way deeper than that.
Exactly. The sources we're analyzing today show that this is a mechanical, systemic process. It's really the complex architecture of how a bureaucracy physically manages to look away from a blazing fire.
Okay, let's unpack this because it's basically like hearing a horrific clanking noise in your car engine.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But instead of pulling over, you just reach out and turn up the radio.
Right, just drown it out.
Because you know that actually investigating the noise under the hood would bankrupt you. You know there's a problem, but by not officially diagnosing it, you don't have to pay to fix it yet.
Exactly.
But how does a sprawling government apparatus actually turn up the radio?
Well, it rarely looks like some dramatic, smoky room conspiracy. It usually starts with something as mundane as plausible deniability.
Right, the classic defense.
Yeah. Information is compartmentalized so heavily that top leaders can genuinely or at least legally claim total ignorance when an operation fails.
Or when a scandal finally breaks.
Right, because the raw data is intentionally stopped before it ever actually reaches their desk.
So it's the classic, I was never briefed on that defense. It's essentially building a firewall between people making the decisions and the people holding the inconvenient facts.
Exactly. And, when plausible deniability isn't enough, the sources point out that you see pure willful blindness.
Oh, wow. Which is what exactly?
That is the act of halting an investigation the exact moment it looks like the team is about to gather definitive proof of a problem.
Because the moment you have proof, you're on the hook for it.
Precisely. You are legally and politically bound to respond.
Which brings up malicious compliance. And I have to say, that is such a brilliantly sinister bureaucratic concept.
It really is.
Is that essentially when an agency follows the absolute letter of the law so strictly that they just completely ignore the spirit of it.
That's the core of it, yeah. A bureaucracy will strictly follow a very narrow, rigid set of rules to deliberately avoid looking at the big picture.
Right.
They refuse to connect the dots because their specific, narrow mandate doesn't explicitly command them to connect those dots.
So they could just sit back and say, hey, we followed protocol to the letter.
Exactly. While a totally predictable disaster unfolds right in front of them.
Unbelievable.
And you add to that a culture of politicized intelligence filters. Analysts quickly learn to only pass upward the information that aligns with the administration's current goals.
And the dissenting data just gets quietly buried in a desk drawer somewhere.
You've got it.
And we see this play out in history constantly. I mean, the sources bring up the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, yeah, a massive example.
Regulators possessed absolute mountains of data on subprime mortgage risks and predatory lending practices. It was sitting right there.
But acknowledging that massive bubble meant actively shutting down historic economic growth, right?
Exactly. And going to war with the most powerful financial institutions on Earth. So they just looked away.
Yeah, and the same mechanical avoidance applies to foreign policy, too.
Oh, definitely. Like in 1995, before the Srebrenica massacre.
Right. Western governments and the UN had clear intelligence that Bosnian Serb forces were preparing a mass slaughter.
But officially validating that specific intelligence would have required a massive shift.
Yes. They would have had to change a very narrow peacekeeping mandate into a highly dangerous active military intervention. So, again, willful blindness.
And it's not just global events, right? It happens locally, too,
Oh, for sure. We even see it at the hyperlocal level with corporate environmental hazards.
like toxic spills and things like that.
Exactly. State regulators frequently possess raw data on industrial leaks or, forever chemicals or emissions violations.
But enforcing the law might shut down the major local employer.
Right, which would completely decimate the town's tax base. Or, frankly, it might expose the fact that the regulators themselves failed to act years ago.
So it all comes down to the sheer cost of action. The moment a government formally knows something, the clock starts.
Exactly.
If fixing the problem requires billions of dollars or deploying the military or causing a massive diplomatic rift, it is infinitely safer for a career official to just, keep the data unverified.
Yeah, there is a massive element of bureaucratic self-preservation at play here.
Because nobody wants to hold the bag.
Right. For a career official, discovering a massive systemic failure under their watch is basically career suicide.
So sweeping it under the rug ensures the bomb goes off during the next administration's tenure.
Exactly. But the sources highlight there's also a psychological component, which is cognitive dissonance.
Right, where the brain just rejects what it doesn't want to hear.
Yeah. When hard intelligence directly contradicts a deeply held geopolitical strategy or an ideological belief, leadership just filters it out.
Wow.
The state apparatus, much like the human brain, strongly prefers to ignore facts that disrupt an established, comfortable narrative.
But, turning up the radio to ignore the engine is still a passive reaction. You're just blindly hoping the car gets you home.
True.
What happens when an institution decides to actively convince you, and perhaps themselves, that the engine clanking is actually a brand new luxury feature?
Oh, that is a huge shift.
Yeah, we are moving from Rumsfeld's unknown knowns, that strategic ignorance, into the realm of manufactured truth.
This is a crucial pivot in the sources. When a government locks in a predetermined narrative, the dynamic shifts entirely from passive avoidance to active manipulation.
It basically becomes intelligence manufacturing.
Exactly. Instead of ignoring facts to avoid taking action, the institution actively seeks out, highlights, or bends specific data points.
Just to justify a policy decision that has already been made behind closed doors.
Right. They reverse the traditional pipeline. Usually, evidence dictates the policy.
Makes sense.
But here, the policy is set in stone first, and the analysts are commanded to go find the evidence to support it.
Wow. Policy-driven evidence. And that leads directly to cherry picking, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Cherry picking and the systemic suppression of dissent. A government will amplify a single, maybe entirely unverified report because it supports their chosen narrative.
Well, just burying a mountain of high-quality data that contradicts it.
Exactly. And to achieve this, they often bypass traditional intelligence channels or expert review boards.
Because they know those boards will probably push back.
Right. So instead, they create specialized, insulated echo chambers. Little task forces designed to provide the exact answers leadership wants to hear.
And when they finally present this to the public, they use semantic weaponization.
Yes.
Which, if you watch the evening news, you see this constantly. It's the use of highly suggestive, speculative language to present a worst-case scenario as a definitive fact.
Phrases like sources indicate.
Or could potentially, or it is consistent with.
Right. It gives the illusion of hard evidence without legally committing to it.
The sources bring up the 2003 invasion of Iraq as a prime historical case study of this mechanical process.
It really is. The predetermined narrative presented to the global public was that Iraq possessed an active, operational chemical and biological weapons program.
One that posed an imminent threat.
Exactly. But the declassified record shows that a central piece of evidence regarding mobile biological weapons labs came from a single, unverified defector.
Right, the guy codenamed Curveball.
Yes, Curveball.
The sheer audacity of how that intelligence bypassed the safeguards is just staggering.
It really is. The CIA and the German Federal Intelligence Service had profound, documented doubts about Curveball's credibility.
And his mental stability, too.
Yeah. But because his specific claims perfectly matched the predetermined narrative for going to war, his unverified reports bypassed the skeptics entirely.
They were just rushed straight to the top and presented to the UN Security Council as verified, actionable intelligence.
Exactly. And another stark example from the sources is the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964.
Right, which served as the primary legal justification for escalating the Vietnam War.
Yeah. The narrative pushed to the public was that North Vietnamese torpedo boats launched two unprovoked attacks on a U.S. Navy destroyer.
But that wasn't the whole truth.
No. Decades later, declassified NSA documents proved that while a skirmish did occur on August 2nd, the alleged second attack on August 4th never happened at all.
It was literally just a false radar reading caused by bad weather.
Exactly.
And the ship commander sent immediate reports stating the second attack was highly doubtful.
Right. But the Lyndon B. Johnson administration wanted a mandate to expand the war.
So they chose to present the false radar report to Congress as an absolute certainty.
Which is just wild.
It is. And here's where it gets really interesting for me. Are the officials doing this just sitting in a smoky room rubbing their hands together like evil masterminds?
That's the big question.
Like, do they know they are lying, or do they actually start to believe their own spin?
The sources describe this as the phenomenon of strategic blindness. It's rarely cynical mustache twirling.
Okay.
When a government fires, sidelines, or deliberately ignores the analysts who tell them inconvenient truth, they systematically destroy their own early warning systems.
So they just surround themselves exclusively with people confirming their existing biases.
Exactly. And eventually the creators fall victim to their own propaganda.
Wow. So they blind themselves.
Yeah. By the time the manufactured narrative collapses under the weight of reality, the state is often left completely blind and wildly unprepared for the actual crisis.
Because, I mean, you can fire the truth tellers, but you can't fire reality.
No, you cannot.
Eventually, the truth catches up. And that brings us to the ticking clock of exposure.
Right.
We are talking about the medium to far future, maybe 10 or 20 years down the line, when the known truth that was so carefully disregarded is finally exposed to the daylight.
And the institutional fallout when that clock hits zero, it hits on three distinct levels: legal, ethical, and moral.
Let's break those down.
Yeah.
Legally first.
Legally, governments usually rely on sovereign immunity and classification laws to protect themselves in the short term. You generally cannot sue a state just for making a bad policy choice.
Right, of course.
But there is a massive vulnerability here. It's the absolute death of sovereign immunity. If a plaintiff can prove intentional fraud, corruption, or a deliberate cover-up, those state protections often collapse.
Which just opens the floodgates for budget-breaking class action lawsuits decades after the event.
Exactly. And in a military context, you have the doctrine of command responsibility.
Right.
Leaders cannot claim they didn't know about an atrocity if a paper trail eventually surfaces proving they were actually briefed.
So under international law, choosing to look away from a war crime makes a commander legally complicit in it.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Then you have the ethical rot of the system itself, institutional demoralization.
That's a huge one.
When a public body forces a false narrative, it signals to its own scientists, auditors, and intelligence analysts that possessing integrity is actually a hazard to your career.
Yeah, the highly principled experts either resign in protest or they just get pushed out.
And what you're left with is a deeply compromised workforce that values quiet compliance over the truth.
And that creates a massive geopolitical vulnerability, too. Weaponized truth.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Right. By relying on a lie, a government basically hands its foreign adversaries a loaded weapon.
Because if a hostile intelligence agency discovers the hidden truth, they don't even have to lie to attack you.
Exactly. They can just leak the truth strategically to destabilize the nation, trigger civil unrest, or blackmail top officials.
That is terrifying. And finally, the moral implications. We see this utilitarian betrayal.
Yeah, governments often justify hiding the truth by saying we are preventing a public panic.
Or, we are protecting the economy for the greater good.
Right. But morally, this reduces everyday citizens to literal chess pieces, just moving them around a board without their consent.
And it triggers the multiplier effect of harm. When you disregard a known truth, the underlying problem doesn't just pause, right?
No, it's left completely untreated. A minor environmental leak that could have been cleaned up in a month becomes an unmanageable generational toxic zone 20 years later.
Or a minor financial anomaly becomes a systemic, global economic collapse.
Right. The moral failure isn't just the original lie. It is the decades of compounded, preventable suffering that follow directly because of the lie.
So what does this actually mean for you listening right now?
Yeah, how does it apply?
When you turn on the evening news and see a government dodging a scandal, It's exactly like paying only the absolute minimum balance on a credit card.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
The core problem doesn't go away. The compound interest of suffering just gets passed down for the next generation to pay off.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate casualty of this entire mechanical process is public trust.
And trust is everything.
Trust is the fundamental currency of governance. When a public body is caught actively lying about something it historically knew, it doesn't just destroy trust in that one specific administration. It destroys the credibility of the entire institution for generations to come. Just think of the decades-long public skepticism toward public health organizations or intelligence agencies following massive historic declassifications.
Which perfectly sets up the final phase of this vicious cycle. The truth eventually explodes, the public is rightfully furious, and the state is forced to investigate itself to restore that lost trust.
Enter the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or the TRC.
It sounds fantastic on paper, honestly, a mechanism for healing. But what happens when the fix is still in?
Well, the sources show that when a state tightly controls the formation of an oversight body, it transforms a tool of healing into a sophisticated instrument of state-sponsored narrative management.
Transitional justice scholars refer to this as a captured commission.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, because governments rarely cancel investigations outright. That looks far too guilty.
Right, obviously.
Instead, they rig the internal appointment and mandate process to sanitize the past and protect the institution's legacy.
It's all about how they structure the inquiry. The sources mention ideological stacking.
Yes, quietly appointing hyper-partisan figures or military sympathizers who have a vested personal interest in protecting the status quo.
Or they use financial and personnel strangulation.
Right. They give the commission a beautifully grand title, but a tiny budget.
And they force them to use state-approved investigators, so they physically lack the resources to pursue uncomfortable leads.
They also rely heavily on selective mandates. They restrict the legal scope of the inquiry from the very outset.
Like the commission might be explicitly forbidden from naming names.
Exactly, or investigating specific intelligence agencies, or looking back past a very conveniently chosen start date.
Wow. But perhaps the most insidious and effective tactic is the respectable neutral strategy.
Oh, yes.
That concept blew my mind when I read it in the sources.
Yeah.
Because it weaponizes trust itself. Explain how a respectable neutral operates.
So the government appoints highly visible, widely beloved civic figures to lead the commission. Perhaps a revered academic or a prominent religious leader? Okay. But they specifically select someone who is intentionally naive to the inner workings of government or completely lacks the hard, adversarial investigative background required to challenge a complex cover-up.
Wow. So their pristine public reputation lends credibility to a weak investigation.
Exactly. And if critics attack the flawed findings, they look like they are attacking a beloved civic saint.
That is incredibly manipulative. And we see this exact playbook executed in recent history.
Yes, frequently.
Like in Sri Lanka in 2010, the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission was established to investigate the Civil War.
Right. And the prevailing state narrative was that the military acted with absolute pristine restraint.
So they stacked the commission with appointees heavily tied to the wartime government.
And the final report miraculously ignored massive, verified evidence of the deliberate shelling of civilian hospitals.
Unbelievable. And in Kenya, following the 2008 post-election violence, the president literally altered the final Truth Commission report before it was permitted to be released.
Yeah, aggressively cutting out entire sections that explicitly linked his own family to illegal land grabs.
And in Chile, in 1990, investigating the horrors of the Pinochet regime.
Right. The initial rules forced an even split of Pinochet loyalists and critics on the commission.
So by demanding total consensus from that deeply divided group, they effectively soft-pedaled the systemic nature of the military torture.
Exactly, framing it more as a chaotic, two-sided conflict rather than state-sponsored terror.
But this raises an important question for me. If they rig the investigation so obviously, doesn't it just backfire? I mean, the victims lived through it. They know exactly what happened, and they know they are being lied to again.
It absolutely backfires. A rigged commission institutionalizes grievances.
Right.
When victims see the official records scrubbed of their suffering, it validates their core belief that the state is fundamentally illegitimate.
Which creates incredibly fertile ground for future civil unrest.
Yes. It also causes the total collapse of transitional justice legitimacy. Citizens become permanently cynical, assuming any future special task force or royal commission is just an elaborate political whitewash.
But the legal backfire is the most tangible consequence here, isn't it? The boomerang effect.
Precisely. Under international law, there is a concept called the principle of complementarity.
Okay.
Essentially, international bodies like the International Criminal Court, the ICC, act as a court of last resort. They only step in if a sovereign country is deemed unwilling or unable to genuinely investigate its own atrocities.
Ah, right.
So by running a blatant sham of a TRC, a government legally proves to the international community that it is unwilling.
Wow. They effectively hand international prosecutors the exact legal justification needed to issue global arrest warrants for state leaders the moment they travel abroad. It is a what's that?
It's the phenomenon of shadow reports. In the modern era, a rigged state commission cannot control the flow of information.
Right, because of the internet and global networks.
Exactly. When a state actively suppresses testimony, international NGOs, journalists, and victim networks simply gather that rejected data and publish parallel shadow reports.
Oh, wow.
So the official sanitized state report is historically humiliated and left to rot in an archive as transparent propaganda.
Well, the outside NGO's shadow report becomes the internationally accepted truth.
Which leaves us with a profound question to mull over. If a government can no longer successfully hide its unknown knowns, and an outside network shadow report becomes the permanent global historical record.
Has the state officially lost its monopoly on writing history?
Exactly.
The ultimate unknown unknown. Rumsfeld's matrix simply didn't account for what happens when the people you are hiding the truth from just write the actual facts down themselves.